Alright, you're very welcome along. It's Friday nights off the ball. Drago here with you all the way through until 10. Will is here. Will, how are you?
Good. How you getting on?
Mick is here. How are you?
Hi, Ger.
Mick, the cat that got the cream, or half the cream, anyway. Nathan's argument last night that the Munster game didn't matter, not borne out by the facts or the scenes inside the dressing room afterwards.
Yeah, although not to make Nathan's point for him, but would his point not be what are they doing with those scenes and why are they enjoying this so much when ultimately
let's police people's celebrations,
which was exactly my point. Yes, as in like
when did he morph into Keys and Gray?
He just seems to hate sport. That's all I'll say. He just the idea that was an event in it for itself, for the fans that wanted to go, for the players that wanted to play in front of the fans, and for
I think it's actually even bigger than that. So it's not just an event in and of itself. It's part of a long series of historic matches that this team hosts, travelling other countries and plays them, and the countries respect this team enough to go, yeah, we'll play you, no problems, of course we will. And like, that's a powerful, important thing.
Yeah.
I know nothing about rugby league, but state of origin is like two made up teams, right? But it's like the most important. Everybody
the best
watches
of the two
it.
regions, yeah.
Yeah, but like made up, right? Mm-hmm. So, and yet
Queensland, New South Wales, and it's like it's not about what clubs you represent now. It's where you're from.
They've decided that this is important, and because it's been important for a long time.
The Railway Cup, like.
Yeah, but like you could easily convince me of the merits of the Heineken Cup didn't exist 25, 30 years ago, and like now it's very important. You know that somebody invented the European Cup, and they decided, okay, this is going to be something. Now, obviously, Ireland versus or an Irish province versus South Africa isn't going to be something that goes into the future.
I was going to say you're going a bit farther.
It's part of a long-term thing where Munster play teams, and I just like, what's the big deal? Let's all just enjoy ourselves.
It's also 40,000 going to a rugby match in a GEA stadium. There's something I think fantastic about it. Like,
you were saying that was your key takeaway here.
Yeah, I mean, we were kind of having a look in the TV, and first thing was Porky Queeve sparkled under the lights middle of the evening.
Even though the weather was biblical.
It was bad, but I was kind of thinking how many times since Porky Queeve has been renovated that we had an actual, we'll use air quotes here, a prime time match at night time under the lights there, because there were no crowds there for a couple of seasons with COVID. So remember that Munster final where Cork scored the late goal? It was an empty ground.
Yeah.
While this time around it was actually 40,000 plus there. I think it sets the scene very nicely if they want to play a Heineken Champions Cup quarter-final or semi-final in the future.
An Ireland soccer match?
They'd have to get a derogation from the FAI to be able to do so, like they did for the pre-Euro 2016. I'm going to say the two games they played. Remember they played Turner's Cross, one of those games. We played Belarus there, I think. But you would need to get an exception, not to play the game at the Aviva. But there's, again, a strong argument to be had for that. Porky Queeve looked great. I know our own Stephen Kipsey Green was first time that he got to Porky Queeve, and his first complaint was how long it took to get out. And I was just saying to him, if you've been to a GA game in the last 30 years in Porky Queeve, you know what it's like.
I did warn him all week. I'm saying, like, enjoy Porky Queeve now. It is the walk down and it is the walk up, and the getting out of the stadium, no matter what way they design it, the new stadium is a disaster. But sure, look, I think it's all part of the fun of it, to be honest. But I think it looked better. I don't know whether it was the night time or we've had night games before in Porky Queeve, but it looked better than the GA games do. I don't know what that is. Does the pitch fit better into the stadium or something?
Was it full?
It was more full than you would possibly see.
I haven't seen it. Has Porky Queeve been full that often? Like,
I don't think so, really. The only time I was there for games, it was do you remember the time Clare and Wexford played in the quarter final when nobody wanted it in Cork, and it was a Saturday afternoon, and there was both rightful arguments about the bad timing and then also a terrible attendance as well. Like, it was really weird. It felt like a league match.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my experience of it since it's been done up, which is unfortunate.
I don't think the football team have been strong enough to fill it, and I don't know if the hurlers have had a big enough game.
No, one of the biggest occasions I remember going there was fairly full was the Liam Miller testimonial match.
Yeah.
Where it was packed out that day. Which again was a lovely scene. It took ages, much like last night, to get out of there afterwards, but that is the constraint of the geography of where the stadium is in Cork.
So two non-GA games are the two highlights so far. I think they would have filled it out against Limerick this year, funnily enough, only for the fact that they decided not to have the game there.
Because of the concert.
Yeah,
so hopefully it'll start to fill up more often. You know, hopefully the hurlers have a bit of an uptick in fortunes.
Yeah, you say hopefully now, Ger.
Okay. I think a strong Cork is good for the game generally.
Yeah, sure. No, you're right there.
20 years have they not waited long enough?
come here. What about the lights and the nighttime thing and the midweek thing? Like, we just haven't. We've decided that there's no culture of midweek games in Ireland because you can't expect people to travel. And then it's like, well, in America, and then England, everywhere else has midweek games in full stadiums. The League of Ireland has some, but not as many as you might think.
Mondays, yeah.
What's the story? Are we just like, the traffic's too bad?
You've always liked the kind of like throw the sport on every night of the week and see what happens.
Well, that's a bit of experimenting.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. So look, it seemed to work, but I wonder if it was if it was an every week thing, would people be as interested? But I think rugby certainly should
Thursday
be thinking
night
about it. Like I think the URC weekend, there's no reason it shouldn't go from Thursday to Monday.
Yeah,
and just kind of get a little bit of spread out over. Like it is well spread out from Friday to Sunday as it is, but add an extra couple of days onto that.
It doesn't have, certainly in my mind, it doesn't have this window where I know that there's going to be a game at this time every week and it's probably going to be the best game of the weekend. Like, it has not established that, and for various reasons, the URC is a brand new competition, and because of COVID and the time zones is obviously a problem as well. But like, you just need windows where every Thursday night it's going to be a game, every Friday night it's going to be a game, every Monday night it's going to be a game, and go up. Like, maybe you can't go up against Monday Night Football. I don't know.
Yeah, it's tricky, but like, add a benefit, particularly for Thursday, you add a TV window for yourself as well, where you don't have to compete with other sports pretty much being on at the same time on Saturday and Sunday. It'll only work for some sports. I think there's been huge resistance about the idea of inter-county GAA. Even they've only had a couple along the way. It will happen eventually, I think, but when it's amateur players and they have to get time off work, that becomes a tricky one.
But like, loads of people work on Saturdays and Sundays now. I know fewer people do, but loads of people do. Like,
but
the world has changed.
The maximum amount of, you have to cater to the majority, don't you? And that they're all students and they can take whatever days off they want. If we're going with the majority.
League of Ireland Thursday, though, could potentially be quite interesting if they got a broadcaster in behind who would do a set game every Thursday.
Don't open that can of worms, Will.
You'd have to have it, though.
On FAI Cup Final weekend, come on.
I know.
53106, if you've got a view on this, you can tweet us at Off the Ball as well. Duffer and the Stardust of the FAI Cup. Do they need to win the trophy this year to like kick on? We have a good sense that Derry will kick on, that there's going to be money there, that's a long-term project with rich owners. Like, I mean, there were talks, Dan had a story about Shelbourne perhaps getting investment from the Southampton owners, which would be very interesting. But like, Duffer winning a trophy in his first full season would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's probably the best story, isn't it? Like, I mean, Shell's story this year was consolidating their place in the Premier Division, but that's not that sexy. Like, they were 7th for the entire season, sometimes like with nearly 7 or 8 point buffers on either side of them. Like, they've been playing for nothing in the league for a long time now, but the cup has been this run where you have this celebrity manager, not in the bad sense of the word, but the guy is going to get some eyeballs, some eyeballs on the product, and they go and win.
Him and Pippa O'Connor. Whoever else, I can't actually remember anybody. Cascarino.
Cascarino won it one year.
Did he?
Yeah, he won it with collection, I'm going to say. Hey, Marty Whelan won
Marty,
one year as well.
I was trying to
First year was
of.
Marty, I think.
Yeah. But yeah, eyeballs on the product, you go and win the cup and it becomes this huge story, and Duffer is a categorical success story, whereas I think if they don't win, Derry win handily, it's going to set up a bit of Derry Rover stuff for next year that I think is going to happen anyway. But where does it leave Shells? It probably leaves them in a kind of a, it's a
good but not
nobody really knows what to expect from them going forward. There's no real buzz to it.
It also meant Damien Duff provided some very interesting copy for the newspapers this week when he said the end of the match, 5 o'clock, as long as extra time doesn't happen at the Aviva at the weekend, will be the proudest moment of his career. There's a guy who scored goals in the World Cup. There's a guy who's won 2 Premier League medals, and he's saying that managing Shells in an FAI Cup final is going to be the highlight of his career to date. And you had Rory Higgins talking about the fact that he's gone from chasing Damien Duff for an autograph to now managing against him. So Duff has added that little bit of stardust definitely going into this final, and the fact that Shells potentially could do a cup double after their women's team last week.
Yeah, of course, Damien Duff, one of the top 20 appearance makers in the Premier League who's non-English. Did you all know that? Very important fact.
Handy one for the quiz potentially.
Maybe, yeah.
Hope nobody's listening.
Okay, so I'm as a newly minted all my life Shelbourne fan since the start of the season, I really hope that they do it.
Come on to the bandwagon.
I do though, like
local boy.
Well, you can literally hear my back garden anytime the game is on. You can hear the crowd, and the atmosphere is amazing. Like, it's absolutely fantastic, and you can just feel like something is happening. And I'm sure it's exactly the same around the Brandywell. You know, but they're going to get James McLean back inside the next 18 months or so, and that'll be the shot in the arm for them.
Do you think so?
I do think so, yeah.
Right, 18 months.
I think.
Yeah.
By the end of his contract, I think he'll make the trip home. Well, he's heavily hinting at it all the time as well.
And I think James McLean is going to play at the same level he's at now until he's about 45. Like, he looks after himself better than Tom Brady, you know. So, right. We want to play you this, right? This is Rio Ferdinand, who was on Newstalk Breakfast this morning talking to our colleague Shane Coleman about whether or not broadcasters should be going to Qatar. Have a listen.
Just in the last couple of days, obviously well after you made the documentary, the FIFA Qatar ambassador, World Cup ambassador, coming out and making comments about people who are gay, or he talked about damaging the mind, and they have to play by our rules when they come to Qatar and stuff. Like, does that devalue the World Cup? Does that, in your mind, and just having done this documentary, are you shocked by those kind of comments?
Yeah, and I think everyone who watches this documentary will know exactly where I stand on this topic. So I have my views like that, and it's quite evident to see. But it's I don't think you can make change or start the education process to change and help with that moving forward and change culture. You can't do that from afar. You have to be on the ground. You have to be there to feel it and see it. And then you can start that conversation and try and re-educate people. But that's why I've heard people say, the BBC shouldn't be going, ITV shouldn't be going, all the sponsors should pull out, etc. That doesn't change, though. That doesn't help change. I think, like I said, you've got to have a unified approach where you're on the ground, you're in the room, and you can speak and feel, smell and touch. I think the more you stay away from issues and these topics, I think the less chance you have for helping change and moving forward.
I think it's a really interesting point that Rio Ferdinand makes. I'm just not sure I fully agree with it. I do feel, though, that the opportunity for the rest of the world to affect change in other countries and in other regimes, apart from through military force, has gone because of globalisation. Like, the counter argument that you keep hearing from Newcastle fans are the British government does loads of business with Saudi Arabia in a bazillion other different fields, so why are we the ones that are being made an example of, right? And here's the thing: you can say that you think that what the Saudi Arabian government are doing through Newcastle is of a higher order because it's clearly more publicly facing version of sports washing, but it's also true. The defence is also true. The British government and British society has decided that they're going to do loads of business with Saudi Arabia, and then all of a sudden they're like, actually maybe we feel a little bit uncomfortable about this, but the price continues to go up. Like, they continue to do all the business. We are completely reliant on oil from there. Apartheid and the South African regime was brought down by largely the boycotts. People broke the boycotts. But eventually the whole world decided we should stop doing business with these guys because they're bad guys. This is like, fundamentally they're just racist. And that's not good. That's not a good thing. We should stop doing that. Everybody could stop doing business with Qatar, and everybody could have said we're not going to the World Cup in Qatar, and the World Cup would not be happening in Qatar. I don't know what impact it would have. I mean, the people who died building the stadiums, they wouldn't be dead. But globalisation meant that was never going to happen. So this is all very complex to you now. I'm not really sure.
What's your point, I suppose?
My point is it's too late now for, like, no one's going to organise a proper boycott.
No, there isn't. I said this a couple of weeks ago. I thought that, like, it was, and I don't know why I keep putting this on Germany and it's a compliment to them, but I thought that there might come a point where someone of the calibre of Germany might say, we're not doing this, and this was 2-3 years ago. And I think once that ship sailed, and I mean 2 or 3 years ago, I mean a good while, once that ship sailed, there was going to be no element of this World Cup not happening. It needed to be a massive country saying, we're not going, it shouldn't happen, it's wrong, these people have died because of this tournament. That's not good enough, simple as, right? And then England would follow and USA would follow and whatever. That was what needed to happen, and once it didn't, that was it. The one thing I'd say, can I just go back to the Newcastle point, right? This constant throwing of, well, what about the British government? How many of the people criticising Saudi Arabia's ownership of Newcastle would you say are fans of the British government?
I don't. I don't.
Or
I
like
don't-
agree with their
selling
policy
weapons,
Well-
on Saudi Arabia, for example.
But they don't care about it. Is really the thing. They're apathetic towards it to a point where they're not voting on behalf. They're not voting along those lines. It's like I think the horse racing industry in Ireland is very reliant on money from the Gulf, like very, very reliant on the ownership and the money that comes through and the prize money. And we've been sending people out there for years. Like, so we're not really in glass houses, or we're totally in glass houses here. I'm not saying that if they're fans of the British government or they're Tory voters or like they support the MP who decides that we're going to conduct business, but there are so many sectors of business. They Saudi Arabian money washes through the social networks and the movies that you watch. And,
I agree with that. But I do think also there is just eventually there just has to be a line in the sand, though, and there is a difference between investment and business and outright ownership of like a state owning a club. In football,
I guess my point is the horse is bolted, right? And you're asking you're asking the footballers to be more progressive, more informed, better global states people than the actual elected representatives who've decided a long time ago we're going to take the Saudi Arabian money, we're going to take the Gulf money, we're going to take, like in many cases, Iranian money. Like they're happy to take the money because it's actually better in the long run. That's their view for all of society, that we live in this globalised world where what happens over here and what happens over here are largely connected, and so therefore we can't interfere in human rights in China.
Yeah, the journalist David Conn made that point very well in the FIFA Uncovered documentary, which came out this week too, in the first episode. And the genie out of the bottle moment for him was 1978 in Argentina. So a regime change had just happened at FIFA, where issues around apartheid were part of the reason that the change in the presidency happened. They decided to commercialise FIFA. They stuck with the awarding to the regime in Argentina in 1978, and there was genuinely a lot of talk about teams boycotting, and then nobody made the boycott.
Yeah.
And David Conn's point was that was the time when FIFA could have drawn a line in the sand, when they were still partially an amateur organisation, and it was about whether teams would go or boycott the World Cup. They still went, and then it became an absolute commercial powerhouse, and after that there was no chance of a World Cup being boycotted afterwards. He said that basically Argentina was the moment that opened the door for sports washing in the modern sense.
It's true, and like really, apart from the vuvuzelas of South Africa, if you were to see a match, it's very hard to tell like which stadium the match is in, because they all look the same. They all have like Fuji, Coca-Cola, TikTok, whatever.
MasterCard.
Both stadiums, same sponsors.
Yeah. All right. So there you go. We fixed that.
Did we? It sounds worse than ever.
Come on the World Cup, eh?